What was it he said? The devil will sin to deceive the church into basically destroying themselves and the world. Isn't that the Antichrist, as it were? The whatchamadinky? Who'd have thunk it, and whatnot. That is the sound of a barbecue pit lighter. It is 8:35 Central Time. Welcome to the Lost Begotten channel. Before you discount whether or not that is a Balaam, a son of Medusa, okay, and whether or not he is the Antichrist who is sent to us in the end times, when the king of the north will be called down, I guess it's hard to accept who I am as well and my role in all of this. You see, I should be exactly opposite of them. You expect me to come and end free will, and basically it's because you don't understand God's plan to begin with. But what you should be looking for is where your heart would have guided you should you not have been so petty and iniquitous in your life. The time to repent of everything is now, and you have such an ample opportunity too. And if just knowing the truth isn't enough to motivate you, go ahead and read that. Therefore, Son of man, prophesy and say unto Gog, Thus saith the Lord God, in that day when my people of Israel dwelleth safely, shalt thou not know it? Do you even know the blessings you should be counting, America? Did you even know that Obama was a good president, Republicans? He didn't just try to work with you. He loved you from the bottom of his heart because you were his fellow human beings. And you couldn't even see him as that. And indeed the people of Israel dwelleth safely. But Gog doesn't seem to know it. So let's put Gog into context there as the Horde. The Horde just keeps attacking America and just keeps attacking Israel. How about that? And it don't work, does it? They keep saying it was the leftists for a long time, and now it's the far, far right, I suppose. We're supposed to accept that Nazism is the far right. They don't seem to want to accept that America is safe and that Israel is ordained to exist. And thou shalt come from thy place out of the north parts, thou and many people with thee, all of them riding upon the horses of their day, a great company and a mighty army. And thou shalt come against my people of Israel. As a cloud to cover the land, fog of war, not just multitudes of numbers. This is a reference to the deception of the masses. It shall be in the latter days, give reference to my claim in the book of Revelation. And I will bring thee against my land, that the heathen may know me. Who? The vain hypocrites, the Republicans, the evangelicals. Who's doing what Christ would have them do right now? Oh, you'd call them liberals. You'd say they were godless. I will bring the armies and the multitudes of the kings of the north against my land, that the heathen may know me, when I shall be sanctified in thee, O Gog, before their eyes. Y'all know about any king of the north with multitudes of armies and shit, deceiving the world and whatnot? Sound familiar at all? Anybody? Bueller. Welcome to Lost Begotten Channel. We'll be right back. Good morning, Viet alt left. I mean, what? I don't know. Okay, so good morning, everybody. Good morning, Joey, Sean, Emily. How y'all doing? Nice to see you. And yes, I'm just kind of experimenting with moving the broadcast up a little earlier in the morning, as you can see. See if I can scroll this little chat window down. Come on, mouse. So, we have lots of different things happening in various places. And of course, I have the bag of convenience store stuff sitting behind me looking obnoxious. It's always fun. The news has been, I must say, somewhat eventful. It seems kind of suspicious, the timing, doesn't it? Like the particular type and manner and extremity of the attack, it almost seems intentional, as if they were trying to outdo the previous one for a particular reason. You know, so they could parse words more. So they could say, oh, this was one thing and that was another. It's funny how they would have to have collusion with some foreign government connected to in order to be able to pull off something like that. Oh, but they do. Isn't that special? I mean, they're basically deployed directly from former Soviet territories. Many from Russia proper. But, you know, Putin just barely holding on to power over there, doesn't have any control, certainly couldn't close up a border or two if he wanted to, yeah. I really wonder what kind of crack people must smoke. Like, not that I'm familiar with the various types of crack or anything. I think I saw a rock on the street once when I was like 12. But I wonder, like what a crackhead would think of the crack that people must smoke in order to deny that Vladimir Putin's mafia, okay, not Vladimir Putin's Russia, not the Russian people, Vladimir Putin's mafia is what's behind terrorism. On both sides, on both sides, you want to talk about on many sides, on the Nazi side and on the Islamo-fascist side, on the cracker fascist side and on the turban fascist side. You know, like, either way, why don't, how do I not have a lighter? That's what I want to know. Oh yeah, I just took a big crap. I know, probably too much information, but you know. Welcome to the Lost Begotten channel. Weichleiter. Anyway. So, you have, and my God, if some reporters don't start like having the courage to talk about this. And you don't have to sit there and act like there's some conspiracy to create a religion. It's not like there's any falsification behind a billion people's desire to get closer to whatever it is that created them, okay? There's an organized network that causes people who are isolated by other factors to become extremists, okay? And that fucker is at the top of all of it. It's what he specialized in before he gained power, so one can assume, logically, and with experience and wisdom, that if he did a certain thing to gain power, that he would continue to wield power by doing that thing. Now, what he did, he was a Cheka. He promoted extremist groups. That's what he specialized in. So what has he done to wield power? Now look for that. Where was it done? Fox News, Alex Jones, RT. And a vast network called the Shilliverse, which goes back before it all started targeting, the Christian right, and trying to make them rebel against the government. See, just to reference myself, for instance, in reference to all of this and how I fit into all of this, there's commonalities you'll find in these extremist groups with Russian propaganda, and that commonality is also found in every single false cult messiah that has ever come. Especially everyone on modern record. They all, say the Freemasons are evil, they say the Catholic Church is evil. It's like this same pattern, okay? And it's their pattern, and it's their pattern, okay? Now, me on the other hand, I came on here outright and said, I'm defending Freemasons, because even if they've been infiltrated, that's not Freemasonry's fault. Okay? But, frankly, I'm not personally very pleased with the Freemasons, because obviously they let this happen, and obviously they haven't accepted my counsel, have they? In fact, they're kind of annoying, but, I've selected a group who I think I was guided to by fate to contact, because I don't feel bound to going to my local whatever. I've defended the Catholic Church, even in pointing out the genocide that they committed, or helped commit, against the original Christian church of the South. And I don't mean the South, I mean Kemet. I mean Egypt. I mean Africa. I mean salt and pepper, okay? The reason why there's a lot of white people in South Africa is because their proximity to the central horde. Okay? That's it. They didn't, just show up there in the past couple hundred years. It's like Australians didn't just show up there. Okay? It's ridiculous. What you've been taught is ridiculous. I've proven that 20 different ways. And makes me want to go see what Stephen and Evan Strong are up to. Well, I don't know if this means anything to your husband, but I think one of the saddest things about all of this is that there are some very misguided, but underneath the surface, well-intentioned white people who are being misled into causing their own culture's destruction. Donald Trump isn't here to preserve white culture. He's here to make anyone who wants to preserve white culture look like a fool. Okay? Not that white culture is a thing, but, you know, just like the individual cultures within Africa, within Asia, within any other continent should be able to preserve their identities. Why shouldn't people here? Just because, I mean, you know, the native reservation thing didn't go so well doesn't exactly qualify every immigrant who happened to have white skin who came here later as being guilty, you know? And people need to really talk about this in an open-minded way, and it's up to liberals, people who can prove themselves not to be racist, to, as intellectuals, have the courage to address this issue, because otherwise, cultural preservation of any kind is going to be considered fascist, thanks to the ignorant white man's support of that motherfucker. Does the Horde destroy every land they occupy and turn it to desert? They destroy the lands of those who resist and turn that to desert. Turning a land to desert isn't as simple as exhausting the resources. What they used to do was take wagons, hundreds, by the hundreds, filled with salt, and they would go and every single row of tilled field, they would put salt in it. Okay, and when you have massive swaths of tilled land, okay, for agriculture, and that gets salted, that becomes desert in a matter of about 40 years. And I mean desert. But, no amount of irrigation, no, seasonal knowledge, which the people of North Africa had a lot of before this, and preparation, none of that is going to fix salted earth. And all the trees get burned, like everything high is made low. And I'm going to try to think about something else now before I have, PTSD. Because that whole thing started at a wedding. And you have a story about a large group of people being pushed off of a cliff. Those were the wedding guests. And if you're not familiar with that, I think gnosis.org has it. I'm going to stare at my fish tank for a second so I can relax. Hi, Orihime. Look at you, you little beggar. That flame angelfish is eating all kinds of pellets. I mean, she darts after them, chasing them little clownfish out the way. It's so cute. And those little baby, like those little runt clownfish I have, they are getting some cool looking little striping patterns now. Like they're really coloring up nicely. Like they look pretty. Anyway. So, morning Maximo. Huh. Yeah, someone just asked about whether or not every place they occupy is turned to desert. And Sean, were you thinking about the Gobi when you said that by any chance? Because the center of Asia definitely didn't used to look that way. And I don't just mean as far as the big desert plateaus go. For one, didn't used to be that big. For two, there weren't quite that many mountains. It seems like a lot of it's been pushed up. But anyway. Let me, try to remember what the hell I was talking about. Anybody care to guide my thoughts? Or ask any more questions? I start thinking about ancient Christian lands being turned to desert. It was kind of on the subject, though. Oh. There's salt in the Gobi? Yeah, I shouldn't be surprised. Like, you know how some of the best civilized areas are along well-traveled roads and corridors and intersections? Central Asia used to be one such corridor and intersection. And in Final Fantasy X, the story of Xanarkand, seems a lot like that's destruction to me. And then I find this movie. It's hilarious. I mean, it's a 1951 cheesy white guy hero movie like you've never fucking seen before. Oh. Fucking hilarious. But it's called The Golden Horde. And I suppose for those of you who are unfamiliar with The Golden Horde, it is in an image that I'm going to take forever to find, apparently. Golden Horde. Okay. Basically, that's the Golden Horde. And what you need to notice about that is that it's not just the center of the what would later be called the Soviet Union, and kind of debunks that those were all just disparate territories, but also the area that everything gets kind of murky. Every place where the slave armies are bred and kept. and what seems to be the areas that maintain power over them. That's the Golden Horde. Now, you're told incorrectly that Genghis Khan was the king of all this somehow. No, he was a general. That's what Genghis means. Okay? And to decipher who he worked for, all you have to do is follow the lines on the map and see where power was consolidated and held once that empire fell. And of course, this is going to be another image that's apparently going to take me forever to find. Really? Okay. No, here it is. So, here are two alternatives to what existed before and after this Golden Horde. You have one image from basically 900 AD, maybe going back as far as 600 AD, maybe even as far back as 333 AD. The word Justinian comes to mind. But here we have where power was centralized in the central territory of the Golden Horde. Now the central spawning point of the Golden Dawn. That would be these guys and everyone fucking affiliated with them. And especially those guys. This is where they're from. Okay? And this is where also King George's family was from. Which is the last tyrant that was allowed to rule us from afar. According to Genghis Khan's personal record, he was kidnapped and turned into a general as a slave boy for some what is never demystified, some sort of emperor, king, cult, the same one that Alexander hired mercenaries from. And that today is where the so-called Islamic State comes from, including the Caucasus and our friend Mr. Kadyrov. And of course, Kadyrov's little friends. That's where they're from. Note the flag. Chechens and Dagestanis. Anyways. Apricot Valley Immortal. Oh. Do apricots blossom like cherries? Wicked memory flashes. That's all I can say. Wow. Okay, Apricot Valley Immortals, ancient peaceful people living in beautiful alleys along the trade routes. Yeah, there you go. And we planted a lot of trees along those trade routes, too. Yeah. And they blossom like cherries. What did you get? You got left out? What did I miss? What did I miss? There we go. I'm trying to scroll up. Yeah, I mean, locust is a good analogy for what comes before them. But as far as their military practices go, locusts are what's here right now. Okay? And that's what caused basically the world to become blinded with consumerism and disposability. So, the Sahara, the Sahara wasn't just destroyed by normal Khazarian or Roman tabernacular military techniques. They used, I guess, what would be considered alchemists at the time. And I don't mean turning lead into gold. There was a lot of salt used after, okay, but there was a lot of sulfur fired into the air to where it would rain down, and it's like a more nightmarish form of napalm because it's quiet. And it looks evil. I don't know how, like, if you've ever seen sulfur fired, and that's one of the things that brought back my memories while doing this and experimenting with whether I was who I was. The Russians started using sulfur in East Ukraine. That's documented video, and I knew from the blurry video what it really looked like to be running from the shit and not running from it. So, yeah, this time is kind of an overlap. It's like one of those chances that won't be taken, more than likely. What the fuck, Joey? Okay. Just trying to figure out what Joey was talking about. I don't think that needs to be addressed. The Hunza in Pakistan, and they are Prunus family. Is that implying that they're one of the families that claims to be descendant of Krishna? That's interesting. That would be interesting. Krishna probably represents, and I really haven't studied the Vedas all that much. But from what I've gathered, it represents some stories related to the family that was charged with protecting that old trade route. And I think a lot has been lost because it seems to me that there was a point at which that culture was enslaved and forbidden to speak. Okay? And I think their language that they very, very brilliantly, I mean, nothing short of like savant level genius, it must have took to come up with a language that did not sound like a language, and basically the ones who were allowed to speak for the groups that weren't allowed to speak convinced their overseers to let them have the ability to sing. So they developed a song that was designed to sound like it wasn't a language, but it was. And it was the way they told their most valuable stories. And I don't know how you look at that and think that isn't badass, but yeah. Anyways, I haven't read anything that would confirm that, but that's just the way it seems to me. And I remember similar looking people having lost their language, but that wasn't them. Yeah, and if you can find a shaman and tell them that you know an ancient soul who has revealed that story, ask them what they think of it. And well, one thing I know about Krishna is that it seems like he could almost fight as good as I can. Clearly getting too much oxygen here. Anyways. Oh, that is... If that's the way they tell it, that would really tickle me. Like, I seriously have no... You know, like... most of the Veda reading I've done has been through YouTube videos about the Vedas. And by most, I mean all of it. Your boy Vissarion, apparently, he didn't know he was Jesus until he was reading the Vedas, and one day he's like, oh, he's smoking pot and brushing the ashes off his chest. Hey, look, I'm smoking pot and brushing the ashes off of my chest. I must be Jesus. Now, see, I would be being offensive right now if that were really what happened. That's just the story of what happened. But even the story is that fucking stupid. Oh, harmonic resonance. They teach that. That's good. Glad someone hasn't forgotten that. The way these people just concoct chemicals and throw them into their bodies instead of like being alive. I mean, it all starts from a different direction than those, I want to say, deluded faiths have been allowed to preserve factually. Hold on one second. See, the thing is, within the sphere of influence of the old horde, in which obviously that peninsula was, the religions that were allowed to propagate, the religious texts that were allowed to propagate later, had to remove the unifying central nature of God that everyone can arrive to when they really open their minds up to it. And that's actually quite central and a stumbling block between bridging communications, that they don't have this part, and then Christians in this country have moved further and further away from it. You need to accept whatever circumstance you're in to a certain degree. Okay? People have the tendency to become angry at God for what is happening to them. For starters, God takes a walk with you individually through the entire life that you will have before you ever come here. And 9 times out of 10, God will try to talk you out of it. But young souls are always trying to prove their mettle. You sign up for your own suffering. And furthermore, most of what you sign up, or sign on to, or sign up for, just, words, I need to finish the sentence. Most of what you sign up for is not my fault. It's other people's fault. Okay? And I hate to break it to you, but to a certain extent that even includes natural disasters. Don't blame God, the creator of everyone, for your beef with God's wife, Mother Nature. You've been fucking up that relationship for yourselves. You have given no respect to your mother. Period. And furthermore, it's a lot less anecdotal than that. It's actually very concrete spiritual physics that affects this. And it also happens to do with harmonic resonance. Earthquakes aren't natural at all. Earthquakes are the results of reality as it is understood, tearing itself apart and pushing itself further away from each other. That's what causes the shape of the world that you're in. And it is what causes that shape to move. When two centralized ideologies become predominant and unstable, that entire area becomes earthquake prone. And when two ideologies that are completely in opposition, like East versus West, where those manifestations, where those realities center, they're going to have competing borders. And that doesn't entirely explain what is known as the volcanic ring, but it has a lot to do with what's shaped it over the years. So, I mean, it's still dirt, it's still ground, it's still rocks floating on super dense water. Okay, not magma, super dense water. It's floating on brine. Okay, you're floating on brine right now. And every now and again, some fresh water gets mixed along the surface. And it's usually the creation of that water that directly causes the tectonic pushes and pulls. But in summary, and the way to mix understanding of manifestoral reality with plate tectonics is to simply flatten out the model and understand that consciousness causes the growth and expansion of the earth outward from the center. So, let's see what's going on in the comments here. If I can scroll down, I'm all caught up. Oh, look at that, I'm all caught up. Anybody got any questions? Anybody remember what the hell I was talking about before this? Got all philosophical? One of the possible theories that I think might be in the Vedas, Maximo, since you seem like you might be the most familiar, how did I get in the tree? Did I just fall asleep by it and like become it, or? I know I was depressed. That's all I know. I know something very bad happened to me. I think I was betrayed by, like, the one I love most through deception. And I deserved it. like the semantic arguments that were made against me were valid, and I had to sort of punish myself to prove it wrong. Oh, your mother called, huh? Well, yeah, you would have enjoyed that, the last 20 minutes or so of lecture, whatever just happened. Emily. I would enjoy some more coffee if I had some. Oh, look, coffee. I love my wife's new job. They have a coffee pot at the office. She doesn't drink all of her coffee. Ah. I don't know about y'all, but I'm getting tired of looking at these guys. So, let's pick out some new images for the top for no reason. Yeah. Boom 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 boom. Yeah, that'll work. I think. Will it? Maybe. Might work. Kind of. Woohoo! Is there, well, I know there is a story, I just don't know anything about it. A story about Buddha sitting by a tree for a long time until he, like, petrified or something. Is it possible in like, any of those texts that he became the tree? Or, like, that his spirit got trapped in the tree? Because, in, what is it, Mazarean? In one of the Arthurian type texts, it says that Merlin is trapped in a piece of wood, but the word for piece of wood is one word, and they didn't really know what kind of wood or what shape of wood. They just knew that it was wood. That's what they said. You know, tree could qualify, you know. Yeah, bear in mind, as Maximus says, yes, there is that version, especially in folklore. I've always considered the most existential truths to be hidden in children's stories, because I remember a time where that was the strategy. So, what might sound to the scholars of a given theology as the silliest and the most unlikely, and something only for children to be taught, there you have something that they're all missing because they've succumbed to the world. Like, I mean, for fuck's sake, dude. The Billy Goat's gruff are real, man! Saying that like a crazy person, but it's actually true. And you can find yourself incarnated as one. Briefly. As a child. In an alternate dimension. While you're sleeping. The grass is always greener. Watch out for trolls. Yeah, it fascinated me too, Maximo, that, okay, so the Johannite story starts in basically Palestine, goes to Crimea, goes to Europe, goes to North Africa, goes to Central Africa, goes to Egypt, then back to Palestine, then east. Escape time. Then up a river, then back to the coast, then down the coast, then through the Polynesian islands, and basically not from one island to the next, but from one massive iceberg to the next. And yes, those boats work quite well as sleds, just in case you can't tell by looking at them. But where I was going with that is, in addition to the right side arm tattoos being very similar to what I drew when I first regained my, unpacked my memories, the left side is a tree. Now, it looks like a tropical tree, but, you know, tropical people. That's the tree that they would draw, because that's the tree that they would know what looked like a tree. Zen Buddhist and Taoist. See, that has always appealed to me as, you know, like, smart. What I've read of Taoism especially. Yep. One side. Yes, to show you the Maui tattoo, I'm opening my fucking sketchbook. How about that? But I haven't been able to draw anything in because there's no space in for years. Let's see. Maui. There's that. Okay. So, when I was first screwing up the arm tattoo, the central thing right there was supposed to be a spirit orb, and as you know from my other video, I say that spirit orbs often manifest in the form of birds. The higher the spirit, the higher up the order, the food chain the bird will be. Except for a pure spirit, that will be a white bird. But obviously I screwed that one up, as I explained. And then I had a little more clarity when I drew this one. And you can see the outline of that is sort of a three-sided circular triangle type thing. And facing a different way, that's the shape of those things on Maui's shoulders. So, on his one arm he has an eagle, or his spirit orb form, because he's a shapeshifter, he is a spirit orb, okay? And I have 7-pointed star, which basically represents an Anunnaki level orb, an ascended Anunnaki, excuse me. That is first generation, or third generation. First generation that could remotely call itself human. But you can see it's, you know, a very eagle-like shape. And having drawn that star is basically, that's designed to be a magical thing that shapeshifts. Okay. Not necessarily that the tattoo would shapeshift, although that's pretty fucking cool the way they did that. Yeah, it's very much connected to the Templar Cross. In fact, the way his eagle was drawn, if you didn't notice, Maui's eagle was as a Templar Cross. So it's surrounded by the same shape in the same places. One side's an eagle, one side's a tree. Well, well, well. Little Mauer's having trouble with his luck. You little simmy-dimmy minigod. Oh, what a terrible performance. Get the hook. Get it? You don't swing it like you used to, man. Yes, I have the entire song memorized now. So shiny. My wife is texting me. Keyboard phone. So, we might have a visit from the Merface soon. So what I'm going to do is wrap up the Mults section of the broadcast. Oh, this is a good one. I'm going to have to watch this one myself. Just like reflect on everything. Yeah. We're going to talk about the Dossier, and we're going to talk about hidden motivations, plans within plans, what's really going on, what people are missing with the whole Trump-Russia investigation. Coming up on the Locks Begotten channel. Stay tuned. Okay, that was fucking cheesy. Where's this thing? Can you still hear me? Alright, so do we have an echo or is the audio okay? Okay. The significance of the eclipse is that it is the beginning of the end of the end. Comforting, isn't it? And I did like recently. I don't know which video it was. Just like the 2 broadcasts ago, I did a whole big thing on the eclipse and the other eclipse and the rebel flag and how the Easterners know about this, and that's why the fucking St. George's Cross is designed that way. Basically, that's why it's an X, is because of this eclipse that marks the time of our destruction. So, you know, hold on to your fucking seatbelts. I gotta celebrate a kid's birthday. Let's hope they develop superpowers. Yeah. Anyways, so I did want to play these 3 videos for sure. I'm gonna play them in opposite order, starting with this one because these 2 are related. This one is priceless. Okay, but let's start with what Trump is doing with Lindsey Graham, because their interaction is Interesting.
Yeah, you said use the name. Lindsey Graham said, Mr. President, I encourage you to try to bring us together as a nation after this horrific event in Charlottesville. Your words are dividing Americans, not healing them.
Listen, that's the right thing to say. That's a really positive thing to say, and I am sure that Donald Trump, I'm sure he can handle that.
He can take criticism in the spirit of which it's all perfect.
No. Do that. You got to be able to work with people. That happens, and I'm confident.
Nope. He's not that big. He can't take it. The president just tweeted. And some experts and historians will tell you this is not normal, and this is extremely disturbing, and this is a very
What did he say? What did he say? This is a long wind-up. Here's a wind-up. Here's the delivery.
This is not normal. Publicity seeking Lindsey Graham falsely stated that I said there is moral equivalency between the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists, and people like Miss Heyer. Such a disgusting lie. He just can't forget his election trouncing. The people of South Carolina will remember. I would argue that some would say, no, Mr. President, we're going to remember this and you. Hopefully, though, we'll be forgetting soon enough, and Republicans will respond in kind. When are they going to say his name?
Lindsey just said his name.
When is Lindsey Graham, John McCain, and just a few others, and surprisingly, wonderfully, Marco Rubio, when is it going to be more than just a cautious few who have the courage to step up and save the party?
I mean, look, part of the reason Lindsey Graham is able to, I mean, the people of South Carolina, the president said, backed Lindsey Graham all the way along. He won, pretty overwhelmingly in 2014. And frankly, South Carolina has been lately leading on race. Nikki Haley and the Confederate flag taking a very strong stand. Republicans in that state have done several things to their credit lately, and I think Lindsey Graham is very well aware of that. Now, whether this dynamic can go beyond, and that's really what I was watching for from the Republican Party over the course of the last couple of days. Were there going to be people, aside from these two men that we talk about all the time, because they are regularly taking on this president, Lindsey Graham and John McCain, to very little effect within the broader pieces of their party? Now, we did see, we talked about this yesterday, Paul Ryan, the leadership, coming out more quickly, perhaps, with statements condemning neo-Nazis, but as you said, Joe...
You get no credit for condemning neo-Nazis in 2017.
Well,
no credit at all. But you do get credit, Gene, even from your own base, for standing up. Standing up to power, speaking truth to power. Lindsey Graham's been there long enough. What Donald Trump doesn't understand is the more he engages Lindsey, the bigger he makes Lindsey.
Yeah, he makes Lindsey bigger. Lindsey Graham has nothing to worry about for the voters of South Carolina. They love him. He gets elected overwhelmingly, and he can have that seat as long as he wants. He's very secure, and maybe that's one reason he feels he can speak out. Also, Lindsey Graham, often says what's on his mind, and there are a lot of people in Washington who don't have the courage to say what's on their mind.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories, and you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.
Yeah, that was interesting. But, this is priceless.
On the rumor that Gary Cohn could be leaving the White House after President Trump's remarks, the stock market is dropping. Business leaders across industries have
Dow dropped 240 yesterday.
So where's the selling point for President Trump now?
Sure. Well, thanks for letting me be on the show. And first off, my thoughts and prayers go out to Heather Heyer's family, the two troopers that passed, as well as the people who were injured in Charlottesville. And thanks for having me on the show. So as far as what's going on, again, I spent 4 years with President Trump before he ran for the office, so I've got a lot of insight around him in the business world. And today, some of these comments I'm seeing yesterday with these CEOs who have departed from this economic board, it's really amazing. I mean, the market is actually doing very, very well, up 10% year to date.
Sir, the market at this moment, this morning, the market's dropping on rumors that the president's economic advisor, Gary Cohn, could quit.
Look, I'm not a market timer. I'm a value investor, and most people should be value investors, frankly. And so when I look at the long term, the number one catalyst that nobody's going to talk about, especially your show, and others like this is the number one catalyst is the corporate tax. This is the market mover. If
You're
I was
right.
a CEO,
Brad, hold on a second. Brad, hold on.
Yes.
You're talking to new financial journalists, right? I don't know if I didn't know you were going to bring this up, so I don't have the chart ready, but we always put it on. I can find it and I can tweet it out to you. This market started going up on March 9th, 2009, and if you have a ruler, it's a pretty much straight line from there to now. So there is nothing Donald Trump has done to cause the market to be where it is right
And
now.
President Trump would like tax reform to get it done, but those who are working on it have said the president is doing nothing to advance that agenda. And look at those CEOs that are on that council who walked away from it.
I wanted to answer my question, because you guys keep peddling this myth that Donald Trump is responsible for this market. You are a market guy. You have seen the S&P 500 since March 9th, 2009, right?
absolutely.
So do you give Barack Obama credit for all of the stuff that happened from March 9th, 2009 to January 20th, 2017?
The number one driver of this
Answer the
stock
question,
market.
Brad. Answer the question, Brad.
And what is the question?
Do you give Barack Obama the credit for all the stuff that happened from March 9th, 2009 to January 20th, 2017? Because if you do that, then you realize it's not Donald Trump.
But right now, the commander-in-chief is Donald J. Trump. And in terms of the market mover, what's going to actually move this market, what we're seeing now is job creation. President Trump has created over 1 million jobs.
Oh my goodness,
Brad.
stop. For heaven's sake, you know that in the last 6 months of 2016, there were more jobs created. In the first 6 months of 2016, in the last 6 months of 2015, first 6 months of 2015, last 6 months of 2000. I mean, I can just keep on going. Donald Trump's not even close to being the largest job creator in the first 6 months of his presidency. There are 4 recent presidents who do better than him. Why do you continue to say these things?
Brad, yesterday Steve Schwarzman walked away from working with the president. 3 months ago, Steve Schwarzman raised $40 billion of permanent capital for an infrastructure fund out of the Saudi royal family. And yesterday, he said, peace out.
Yeah, look, I used to be a real estate developer for 20 years. I know all about infrastructure. I know about time delays, and time means money. You know, again, as a shopping center developer in my previous life, this is what I did. I don't know what you did, but I've got a long background in business, and I understand the announcement this week on infrastructure, the cost-cutting measures that are now coming in place is going to stimulate this economy and create jobs for everybody, all races, everybody. And that's really what's important. And again, I think that's the most important part.
You notice he keeps looking to the left at his talking points? You know all this shit so well, how come you gotta read it?
That again, the mainstream media really doesn't recognize
Yep.
is this job. When he was hired, I hired him. I doubled down on the President of the United States because I believe in him. You know, I started writing this book 4 years ago. Nobody knew he was going to run for president, but I doubled down on this. I believe he can make America great, and we're already seeing that now. And you can ignore all these. You can ignore these catalysts, but they're there.
Brad, I've given you evidence, Brad. I've given you evidence that the job creation is not as good under President Trump as it was under President Obama, President Bush, President Clinton in the first 6 months of their office. I've given you evidence that stock market performance was better under President Obama, and this is a continuation. But you just deny it, and you go on to say other things. So let's talk about infrastructure, because I can go down this road with you as well. What exactly about infrastructure, of which we need $1 trillion of investment, on which we are given a D+ rating by the American Society of Civil Engineers? What about infrastructure requiring public-private partnerships is helped by an executive order about permitting? That is just simplistic. You know that.
There is no infrastructure bill.
Look, it's just very complicated. And again, I know this is not your background, so it may be harder for you to
What are you
understand.
talking about,
It
Brad?
is far more our background than it is yours.
Brad,
Yeah,
I spent 14 years in investment
You
banking.
can't just lie on TV, Brad. You can't just lie on TV. You actually, I don't know if your people told you who you're coming on TV with, but you can't lie about the economy to us.
I'm not lying about the economy and itself. And again, I'm telling you, the number one catalyst that will move this market is corporate tax. That is.
I know, because I keep reading it off of this cue card.
Number one piece, a rising tide lifts all boats.
And what leads you to believe?
That is.
What leads you to believe we're going to have corporate tax reform? Because in order to do so, the president would need to be working with GOP leadership. And last I checked, he's donkey kicking them on Twitter.
I don't believe that at all. I mean, I certainly, there's a lot of people working hard, extremely hard, including myself, to initiate this corporate tax plan. This is an incredible big piece of this agenda, and that is absolutely the piece that's going to stimulate this economy. I'm amazed to see those CEOs that walked away. If I were a publicly traded CEO today, and I watched my shares of my company generate the gains that we've seen since January 1st, I would be amazed, especially because we haven't even been talking about this catalyst, because the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about it.
That's
so that's
not
what
true,
I'm here
sir.
today talking about.
Allie and I talk about it. Allie and I talk about it all the
You should
time.
fire your press person. Because if they didn't tell you that you were coming on TV with Velshi and Rule, who I think collectively, I don't want to give away Stephanie's age, but between the two of us, we've been doing this for about 50 years. Okay, so let's just, this is just a silly conversation to have with us. You should go to other people's media and say these things, but not to us. We cover this every day, in and out. And the fact is, those CEOs got pressure from their shareholders, from their boards, from their employees, and from their customers to say, we can't stand next to this president who is embracing neo-Nazis. How is that good for business?
One more moment. And Richard Trumka said, this council that we're on, we don't ever meet. We don't do anything. I spoke to CEOs who said all it is a photo opportunity. There is nothing happening at these council meetings.
And again, I think the most significant piece of this is job creation. I'm going to stay on that. I think most CEOs should stay in their lane, do what they do best. I think with Donald Trump, that's what he's doing. The business piece is his lane. He's staying in it. Job growth is absolutely critical.
Fucking word salad, man.
Stimulate this economy. All of these CEOs who walked away, they're going to be really happy when they start seeing this job creation and wealth creation in this country. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But again, I'm reflecting on what he's done year to date since he's been in office. The market has obviously reflected those results. And again, more job creation. You can't argue with the million jobs that's been created.
We can't argue with it, but again, that job creation is on target. It is lower than the job creation we saw in the same time period last year.
And in the last 6 months before. It's lower. I just don't know. I mean, I've gained about 3 pounds in the last week. I'm just not bragging about it because it actually seems to be the wrong thing to brag about.
I just want to invite you back on. In 6.5 weeks, the White House said they're going to have a tax reform bill. I spoke to people inside the White House yesterday working on that, and they said there is no chance that is going to happen, especially since the president isn't helping them do that. But in 6.5 weeks, we'd love to have you back on to discuss it.
Well, I hope you invite me back every week.
But that's all, folks.
Can you watch some of our shows so you don't come on here and say the mainstream media doesn't really they do in great depth? I'll send you some links.
Absolutely.
I will do that. Brad Thomas is the author of The Trump Factor. He's a member of Donald Trump for President Advisory Board member.
You just have to finish.
She's like, I can't even. That was fucking priceless. Oh, I almost want to watch it again, but I'm streaming, so I'll go ahead and just play the next one.
How are we feeling? First day, new school, are you nervous?
I'm very exhausted, hopeless. I don't enjoy the things that I once loved.
Where are you getting this from?
Zola.
Let's bring into this conversation MSNBC anchor Stephanie Rule and White House reporter for the Associated Press, Jonathan Lemire. Good to have you both on board.
Thank you.
You just hit the most stunning point. The fact that they were waiting for Jamie Dimon. Remember how America felt about the financial industry?
Right.
Now it's these guys who have to lead the president. And what's amazing is they didn't even it didn't bother them that the president lied with the, you're not breaking up with me, I'm breaking up with you. They expected it. They're just happy to be out of this.
But the CEO, president, what CEO runs a company like this?
Right,
He's not a CEO.
He's run a family business. He inherited a lot of money, and he's been running a family business. He's never had to be accountable to a board. That's why he's as reckless as he is.
And this was the entire thesis of his campaign, right? That I'm the business president. I can fix what's ailing America. I can come up with new solutions. I'll surround myself with these CEOs. And this, we're how many months in? 7 months in. It's already fallen apart. It's a blow to him, who's also, as you kind of just hit on, never really been accepted in the in club, right? With business CEOs. He's always sort of the outsider. He's never really accepted in the New York elite.
And that's what people don't understand. And I didn't understand when I came to New York. I thought New York was New York. I thought Long Island was like Westchester County was whatever. You get up here and you realize very quickly there's a caste system.
Right.
Donald Trump was always from the outer boroughs. Donald Trump was always the Queens guy. Donald Trump was never accepted.
That's right.
The Trump organization was never even a client to U.S. investment banks. They wouldn't do business with him.
Right.
And suddenly now they went there. He's got this pro-business agenda. Think what this could cost Jamie Dimon in deregulation, in tax cuts. It would be huge.
Well,
yet being close to Trump cost more to him.
It costs more. Let's talk about so many shocking things happen every week. Let's talk about the President of the United States trying to blackmail Amazon.
Right.
He doesn't like what the Washington Post writes, so he tweets that he's going to raise Amazon's taxes. Now, if this happened in any other administration, there would be investigations launched on that tweet alone.
Dictator
And
shit.
30 seconds later, it's forgotten.
It's forgotten.
Because that's the Trump news cycle. I mean, I covered the campaign last year. I'm covering the White House now. And it's things that 5 times a day he will do something that would have perhaps ended Mitt Romney's political career 4 years ago, and here we just move on to the next thing. And the president, we reported that he was very proud of that first statement on Saturday. He felt like when he was in his club at Bedminster, he successfully addressed the crisis in Charlottesville. He had to be pressured into speaking again at the White House a couple days later.
Right.
Even after the news conference at Trump Tower, he's still telling people close to him, I did the right thing, this is how I feel.
Stephanie, a lot of the CEOs Dom just ran through in that report came through late when it was clear that the momentum was heading in the direction that this was the right thing to do. To you, as you cover this, which are the real profiles in courage? I mean, there was Ken Frazier at Merck who came out early and stepped away from the council. He was the only one who specifically drew the ire on Twitter and President, although he said they were all grandstanders that they stepped away. Who started this in motion?
Listen, at the end of the day, they were all looking for an out. This wasn't the first thing. They've had to withstand Trump leaving the Paris Accord. They had to deal with the travel ban and immigration policy. And a lot of them stuck with it on Monday. But it was Tuesday night when he went at it again. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Right.
Do you think Jamie Dimon wants to get a call from me? Hi, Jamie. How do you feel about the Ku Klux Klan? He has a job to do. And that was their point at the end of the day. It's not like, is Gary Cohn going to stay or go? You know, that's his day job. They have day jobs. It's to run major companies, and now it's back to
You know, I really think you look at what Walmart did. There are a lot of Trump supporters who go to Walmart.
Yep,
That was a significant
big.
move.
That's right. That's one that feels like it may touch his base, right?
Yeah.
So much of this White House has been trying to protect that base. Very little efforts to grow it. Most of their policies seem to be that core 30% or so.
Let me just say that what Joe just said was some weird, aloof, windbag shit.
Who've been with him throughout, those who he thinks he could step out on Fifth Avenue, perhaps shoot someone, and they'd still stay with him. The Walmart one seems to hit closer to home. There's some concern in the White House that, like, are we heading down the path where maybe just a little, we might lose some of the course of
You know where I always set up, Gene, when if I wanted to, get petitions signed or do something, go to Walmart.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's a lot of the Republican base.
Absolutely. A lot of Trump supporters work for Walmart, or a lot of Trump supporters shop at Walmart. I mean, that's a constituency. On the other hand, it seems to me, if you're the Walmart CEO, do you want to be the only one left out on that limb? And, and given all that's happened, and the answer is no. Right.
Yeah.
If you're going to take a hit from your customer base or whatever, take the hit now, because it's going to be much worse later.
Look, it seems to me that corporate leaders like Walmart and these big companies and these big CEOs who are walking away and turning their backs to the President of the United States clearly see that he shared with the country what was in his heart, and what is in his heart could be devastating for this country. I hope politicians follow suit. Some have, many haven't.
Larry Summers called out Walmart, and he said, if you don't walk away, if you need to be on this council to get access to the White House as the biggest private employer in this country, then we are running a banana republic.
Yep. Stephanie, thank you. We'll be handing off coverage to you in a few minutes. You have
And like we do every morning, 9 o'clock straight up, give or take 2 or 3 minutes.
0000.
I love
It's
what you
really
learned.
small. It's so
So long-winded.
We always go, it's 9 o'clock somewhere.
We're sorry.
Alex trademark.
Let's bring into the conversation now correspondent for The Economist, John Bosman. The latest cover depicts the president amplifying his voice with an old-fashioned megaphone shaped like a KKK hood. One of the articles in the issue is entitled, Donald Trump Has No Grasp of What It Means to Be President. And it reads in part this: defenders of President Donald Trump offer 2 arguments in his favor. that he's a businessman who will curb the excesses of the state, and that he will help America stand tall again by demolishing the politically correct taboos of left-leaning establishment elites. From the start, these arguments looked like wishful thinking. After Mr. Trump's press conference in New York on August 15th, they lie in ruins. Mr. Trump is not a white supremacist. He repeated his criticism of neo-Nazis and spoke out against the murder of Heather Heyer. Even so, his unsteady response contains a terrible message for Americans, far from being the savior of the republic. Their president is politically inept, morally barren, and temperamentally unfit for office.
That's quite a trifle.
I would add, John, that some are very concerned he has opened the door to violence and more blood being shed in this country based on race. Is that fair?
I think that's a concern. I think if you look at his response, if you think about his response on Tuesday, that what he essentially said was that, look, he saw the same footage everyone else did. He saw hundreds of people marching through an American city carrying Nazi and Confederate flags, chanting, "Jews will not replace us." And he said that among them were some fine people. In other words, you have to judge them by the few among them who may have been there for high-minded historical reasons and who didn't mind associating themselves with Nazis and white supremacists. And then you look at the other side, the thousands of people, students, clergy leaders, ordinary people, who came out to the streets to oppose white supremacy and ethnic cleansing, and said that you have to judge them by the few among them who may have been ready for violence. And I think that sense of equivalency is very dangerous. I think in the past you've always had presidents who, whatever their politics, sort of understood an obligation to call Americans the better angels of our nature, to sort of heal the divides that split us. And that he just doesn't have those instincts. It's very worrying.
John, it's Willie Geist. I know you're not the art director, but just interested in the decision to go with this cover that's going to get a lot of attention today as it spreads around a little bit. A lot of people pointed out that the days of dog whistle have now gone, and now it's a megaphone. But that is a pretty extreme cover with a clamp.
See, now, let me just say something. For those of you who have followed my Twitter, when I say things like we need to be comparing this directly to World War II and saying that the people who are fighting Nazis, even if it's violent, are called Americans, aren't they? They're not the alt-left, they're Americans. Are you saying that 400,000 alt-lefties died defending Europe from kind, decent people or whatever? And it's been the case that every time I suggest rhetoric, my rhetoric preempts what winds up being the loophole argument that the Republicans reply with. They always have a way to weasel through and counterattack the diluted argument. If people say what I'm telling them to say, what I'm suggesting, if they follow my recommendations, fucking Republicans aren't going to stand a chance. You going to sit there and make Republicans argue that we shouldn't have fought the Nazis? There's strategy in my crazy, okay? There ain't no strategy in y'all's normal.
Hood coming in the hand of the President of the United States.
Well, I think it points out to which side he is giving aid and succor in this case. As you say, the days of dog whistle are over. We saw that during the campaign, that he has taken messages that were perhaps dog whistled before and shouted them. And I think the cover points that out in a visually striking way.
Yeah. I don't know if it's that extreme.
John, do you see any profiles in courage emerging from that building over your shoulder, the Capitol? Are there people who are willing to actually stand up and say what you just said?
We'll see what happens as he tries to advance his agenda through Congress, as he turns to tax reform. We'll see if there's any political costs to him doing what he did. I thought we saw some very, courageous stand by Ken Frazier of Merck. And then we saw corporate America, as you pointed out, sort of taking the lead. We saw brands that were associated with that were used by white supremacists over the weekend, sort of rushing to distance themselves from him. And so we'll see who follows that lead. It'll be interesting in the next week or two.
John Bassman, thank you very much. The new issue of The Economist is out now.
And Jonathan, really quickly, I know you can't speak for the AP, but I saw something that I thought was a positive development, which yesterday the AP announced that they're not going to use the term alt-right.
That's right.
Explain that.
Sure. The AP is decided that as a policy going forward, obviously we'll use it if it's in a quote, but we're not going to use the phrase alt-right, believing it's a euphemism for racist behavior and thoughts, that it sort of sanitizes what is truthfully better described as white supremacy or white nationalism or just racism. That it's a decision that the alt-right is more of a branding effort, an effort to sort of tamp down the connotations, and the Associated Press decided in the last 24 to 40 hours we're not going to use that anymore.
The AP's Jonathan Lemire, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Up next, the leader of the NAACP is calling on the president to live up to his responsibilities in 21st century America. Derek Johnson's group has been fighting racism since 1909, and he says we're now in a state of emergency. He joins us next on Morning Joe.
Time for the Dark Kingdom to rise.
I've noticed.
Our first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, ran his first campaign for public office in 1832. Great president. Most people don't even know he was a Republican, right? Does anyone know? A lot of people don't know that. We have to build that up a little bit more. Let's take an ad. Let's use one of those packs.
Frederick Douglass is an example of somebody who's done an amazing job and is being recognized more and more, I notice.
And we've had leaders like Susan B. Anthony. Have you heard of Susan B. Anthony?
Had Andrew Jackson been a little bit later, you wouldn't have had the Civil War. People don't ask that question. But why was there the Civil War? Why could that one not have been worked out?
He told me a year and a half ago or so, a year ago, that he thought he could have done a deal to have averted the war.
So painful. That's our president. Absolutely.
Not my fucking president.
He can't do a deal to get health care through the Senate. It seems unlikely he would have prevented the Civil War.
Yeah, but he says nobody really asks that question. Why did we have a Civil War?
You're a Republican. Did you know Lincoln was a Republican?
You know what? Despite the fact that every year I went to, the Lincoln Day dinner, and
Oh, is that why they always say it's the party of Lincoln?
Republicans have been going to Lincoln Day dinner now, the Reagan-Lincoln dinner for years. No, I thought they were talking about Lincoln Chafee.
Too.
He is great.
Yeah.
But
I thought they were talking about Lincoln Logs, and it was an infrastructure reference.
I thought they were talking about the Hot Rod Lincoln. That was a great song back in the early 70s. Yeah, they were surprised to find out that Lincoln was Republican. He's completely ignorant of American history. He's completely ignorant of American history.
Yes.
He is. I was watching an old interview with him. He's different.
Oh, he's so different.
He is.
People get kind of critical when they say this, but you can see
listen. And we've been going back to the 80s to show clips of him talking. You don't have to go back to the 80s. Go back to 1998, 1999. Go back to 2005. Go back to 2005. He's speaking in complete sentences. He's speaking fluidly. It may still be a mile wide and an inch deep, but he's speaking coherently.
But Joe,
he's certainly not now. There's been a massive decline in his capacity to complete sentences.
And along those lines, and I want to say it again because Trump speaks for himself at this point. I think the key thing is to remember that on his lapel pin going forward,
but he's always been a racist,
condoning Nazis and Klansmen. And if you stand next to him, if you are Gary Cohn and Dina Powell and Steve Mnuchin and Elaine Chao, other than the generals to protect our national, you are standing next to him. And we cannot let that go. The appeal has to continue.
Yeah. Dr. Peterson, we saw another statue come down overnight in Maryland. The Supreme Court Justice who presided over Dred Scott painting. The President tweeted yesterday, sad to see the history and culture of our great country being ripped apart with the removal of our beautiful statues and monuments. He says you can't change history, but you can learn from it. What's your personal reaction to that?
Well, I think that there's one thing to be kind of ignorant of history, but I think it's also something completely different to be disrespectful of what American history is, and not understanding Chief Justice Taney's role in the Dred Scott decision. I don't think he has any sense of that whatsoever. That decision essentially said that African Americans can't be citizens in the United States of America. And folks should do their research on that. I mean, that is probably a step.
I got an idea. Let's erect a statue of Charlie Manson. Because that happened, right? It's part of our history, right? For fuck's sake.
Should have come down a long time ago. Historians will tell you that's one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in the history of the Supreme Court. But I'm just not sure that the President of the United States has any capacity to understand that. So he might be ignorant of history, but also disrespectful of what American history is.
And Stein, this debate is raging now about Confederate statues. The President would love that to be the debate because the majority of Americans, in fact, as Willie was pointing out earlier, even a plurality of African Americans say, just keep the statues up. This isn't about statues, it's about white supremacy. And yet Donald Trump wants it to now turn into a debate about statues instead of white supremacy. And I guess that battle's raging inside the Democratic Party as well, isn't it?
Sure, yes, it is. There's legislation, for instance, that Senator Cory Booker is introducing to get rid of the Confederate statues in Statuary Hall in Congress. And I don't want to diminish this debate. I think it's an important debate to have, and it's a fine debate to have about whether we have these statues up or not. But it's not the right debate to have.
Right.
We just got off, days ago, and it's crazy to even articulate this out loud. A president saying that there were some good neo-Nazis, that there were some good white supremacists. They are related, of course, because the gathering crowd in Charlottesville was there to protest the removal of the Robert E. Lee statue. But we, as a country, shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the most powerful person in this country articulated empathy and sympathy for some people gathering among a crowd that said Jews will not replace us. And it's not just symbolism, it's politics, of course. And I do think you're right, Joe, that this is much more friendly terrain for him to be on, to talk about statues. And I think that it would, I don't want to advise people, but I think we can't lose sight of the fact that the bigger battle here is over empathy and sympathy for white supremacists.
And you're right, the statues, that's a debate to have in time, but right now, that's the debate Donald Trump wants us to have. We're 4 days past this president giving aid and comfort to white supremacists and neo-Nazis, American fascists, Klansmen. If you don't believe that, just look at their words.
And it appears he has a cabinet and a staff that is not strong enough, does not have the moral base, doesn't have the capacity to stand up to him.
Looks that way.
And he has an advisor in Steve Bannon who is openly stoking this and saying, hey, this is how,
This is how we beat Democrats, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Pam
It's with
Stein,
that debate that Sam
James
was just talking about.
Peterson, Donnie Deutsch, thank you all. Still ahead.
Anyways. What is this?
They never found my brother, so naturally I don't do boats.
Are you gonna drink that?
And first from the Fox News deck this afternoon, President Trump, in this hour yesterday, equated the actions of neo-Nazis and white supremacists at a white power rally with the people protesting them. And today he's facing backlash from business leaders and members of his own party. The president announcing hours ago he is dissolving 2 White House business councils as top CEOs cut ties with the president. President Trump tweeting this afternoon, rather than putting pressure on the business people and of the Manufacturing Council and Strategy and Policy Forum, I'm ending both. Thank you all. Of course, just yesterday, the president tweeted, for every CEO that drops out of the Manufacturing Council, I have many to take their place. Grandstanders should not have gone on. Jobs. This is a total of at least 9 executives announced they were resigning from White House councils. More on that in a moment. But first, during an impromptu news conference in the lobby of Trump Tower in Midtown Manhattan yesterday, the president once again blamed violence on both sides after demonstrations turned deadly at a white supremacist rally last Saturday.
Well, isn't that special? So, Barcelona, that was really bad. They're not really saying how bad it was. They're not showing the most graphic images, but they sure do exist. So anyways, if you haven't heard about the Bob Corker rebuke, we'll play that right quick.
Harsh words from this high-profile Republican senator. Again, this is a man that we've seen the president with, who was on the short list for Secretary of State. This is a Republican senator from Tennessee, Bob Corker, and so this is what he has just told reporters. I'm going to quote him. I do think there needs to be radical changes. The president has not yet been able to demonstrate the stability nor some of the competence that he needs to be successful. He goes on, helping inspire divisions because it generates support from your political base is not a formula for causing our nation to advance, our nation to overcome the many issues we have to deal with right now. He also recently has not demonstrated he understands the character of this nation.
I want a meme with Charlotte's Web that says, some competence.
He has not demonstrated that he understands what has made this nation great, what it is today, and he's got to demonstrate the characteristics of a president who understands that people have to understand. We should hope that he aspires, that he does some self-reflection, that he does what is necessary to demonstrate stability, to demonstrate competence, to demonstrate that he understands the character of our nation and works daily to bring out the best of the people in our nation.
Yeah. So, there's this morning's. There's some dumbass. He must be a real stupid bastard. He thinks he can save the world. Anyway.
So in the wake of this terror attack, there are a couple of other things to bring to the table pertaining to President Trump, who began his day yesterday by targeting two senators in his own party, Lindsey Graham.
Oh, if you haven't heard about the General Pershing thing, Trump's sitting there telling this freaking myth about shooting people with bullets dipped in pig's blood so they'd fear, damnation. And, yeah, it's not true. And basically he's condoning genocide, like mass murder. He's condoning mass murder. Anyways.
Graham and Jeff Flake. Now he's getting some tough straight talk from a powerful Republican senator who he vetted for vice president and later considered for Secretary of State. Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, told the Chattanooga Rotary Club yesterday that despite his good relationship with the president, he could no longer ignore, quote, the elephant in the room. Dismayed by the daily distractions, he later said to reporters that there needs to be, quote, some
correction, orangutan.
Radical changes in the way the president conducts himself.
The president has not yet been able to demonstrate the stability nor some of the competence.
This sounds familiar.
That he needs to demonstrate in order to be successful. He also.
They keep playing that, man. Every broadcast I've been seeing, they just keep playing that one.
Recently has not demonstrated that he understands the character of this nation. He has not demonstrated that he understands what has made this nation great and what it is today. And he's got to demonstrate the characteristics of a president who understands that. And without the thing...
What made this nation great? Black people, Mexicans, and Jews, mostly. Sorry.
That I just mentioned happening, our nation is going to go through great peril.
I think we all, around the table, while we were listening to that, said this is a big moment. This is actually, you know, creeping up on a Howard Baker moment where he says the president doesn't have the stability. He doesn't have the knowledge, working knowledge. He hasn't shown it to be president of the United States.
And there were sort of shades of this is unfixable. I mean, he's saying the president needs to change his behavior, but it appears that these are permanent flaws, that these aspects of this president are not going to change, and therefore perhaps others might need to act.
So, Casey, with Bob Corker's extraordinary statement, I mean, I say extraordinary. It's obvious to everybody. But extraordinary for a powerful Republican elected leader to come out and say that. But you actually can see this as a natural progression for Marco Rubio going out and firing off those tweets. Cory Gardner in his town hall meeting speaking truth to power. Even when people were jeering him, Cory didn't give a damn. He spoke truth to power. Pretty extraordinary. We can talk about Jeff Flake. We can talk about Lindsey Graham. We always talk about John McCain and Vince Sass. I mean, we're starting to count up 5, 6, 7 Republicans, 7 Republican senators right there that are saying enough.
Yeah, and look, I think Corker is somebody who has had this presidency or who had a shot at being inside this administration. That's not true for a lot of these other moderates and persistent critics of the president. So he, I think, has an understanding. He's traveled on the plane with Trump, and I think that says a lot. I also, one thing that stood out to me was the framing of what he said. He said that he doesn't think the president understands what has made this nation great. That is a huge repudiation of the entirety of the Trump campaign that was plastered on hats, has been plastered on hats, make America great again. If he doesn't understand what made America great in the first place, that strikes me as a very deep and important.
And really, Casey mentioned that he had the president's ear. He's also had a lot of time to look at this president firsthand. To say he doesn't have the stability is saying he's recognizing something alarming.
Stability, think about that word.
That's
competence, he said, but stability also. He doesn't have the temperament or the makeup
attack,
for the job.
by the way. That's an analysis. That's a concern.
And that's how our allies feel, right? I mean, he's also looking at this. Yes, he may have been talking about Charlottesville, but in the context of all of what we're facing internationally, our allies are unsure of where we are in North Korea. All of that plays in here.
And you know, Yamiche, it seems to me that Senator Corker is the perfect example of the internal struggle many Republicans in that building behind you are having with President Trump. Senator Corker has come on this show now for the last couple of years during President Trump's, well, during his campaign and then during the sort of 7 months of his administration, during difficult times, faced a lot of questions from us, whether it was the Access Hollywood or on and on and on right up now till Charlottesville. And he said, you know, I want to give this president some time. I want to give him some space. He would condemn in the moment, but he would always say, I want to give him a little bit of time. It appears they're running out of patience with this president.
There are a lot of Republicans that I've been talking to that tell me that they are, in fact, running out of patience, that they really did try to give him the benefit of the doubt, the fact that he was able to win the nomination, and then with the presidency, was surprising to his party. And while some people thought, okay, this guy is brash, he's a little wild, at the end of the day, they thought once he's in office, he'll be able to get legislation passed. Republicans have real things that they've been waiting to do for 8 years. They have all these different plans, infrastructure, health care, tax reform. But really what they're seeing is a president that is picking fights with the very people that he needs to help him. You think about his attacks on Mitch McConnell, his arguments with Jeff Sessions. So really the Republicans I talked to have been weighing, one, whether or not to pull support altogether from the president. And I've even been talking to some black Republicans who are wondering whether or not the party as a whole is a place that they can remain.
Yeah, well, you had business leaders walking
about
out.
Damn time.
Members of the military being critical. You have some Republicans stepping up, and also this now, 21st Century Fox Chief Executive James Murdoch has criticized President Trump's reaction to the violence in Charlottesville and pledged to donate $1 million to the Anti-Defamation League. In a personal email yesterday to friends later confirmed by a Fox spokesman, the son of Rupert Murdoch, a close friend of President Trump's, wrote that while it wasn't his habit to weigh in on current affairs, quote, what we watched this last week in Charlottesville and the reaction to it by the President of the United States concern all of us as Americans and free people. He added, I can't even believe I have to write this. Standing up to Nazis is essential. There are no good Nazis or Klansmen or terrorists. Democrats, Republicans, and others must all agree on this, and it compromises nothing for them to do so. Murdoch went on to say that he and his wife plan to donate $1 million to the Anti-Defamation League.
Well, explain why your father has been peddling the counter-pincer agenda of the very person who's behind most neo-fascist propaganda. It's two sides of a pincer. In fact, he's supposed to be a Jew, but he's the one basically been behind a veiled neo-fascist news network called Fox fucking News.
And urged others to do the same. That's big. That's a close friend of the president. They spent lots of time together. I know they were together the Sunday after President Trump won the election. They were hanging out together with friends and very tight. That's a departure.
Talking about Rupert Murdoch was his son James, who obviously helps run the company. And obviously Rupert Murdoch, one of the most powerful guys in media, actually still is spending a good bit of time with Donald Trump, and by all accounts is telling him, get rid of Steve Bannon, get your head down, and start doing your business. Even a man who many consider to be his closest ally in media, Rupert Murdoch, if you read the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal day in and day out, they are doing the right thing when it comes to criticizing this president. Again, this president is finding himself more and more isolated, and this very commendable letter by James Murdoch shows just how small this president's circle is becoming, where he's now surrounded by, perhaps white nationalists and a few people who pathetically cling to power for their resume.
Right, and he's hurting his capital, right? His ability to maneuver, whether it's domestically on legislation or internationally, he's diminishing his ability to operate, and we're seeing that with the resignations from the various councils. But I think even before Charlottesville, there was this growing desire, as you all know and have talked a lot about, for greater internal discipline for how the policy process is working, discipline for how the White House itself operates, discipline with respect to leaks, discipline with respect to the messaging. And I think all of that has been, in many ways, lacking, and I think the reactions you're seeing, both fundamental reactions to some of the things that have come in the wake of Charlottesville, but also even before that, the lack of policy progress on the Hill, and certainly challenges with the president's communication and lack of coordination within the administration has been a real challenge. And I think you're seeing and feeling a lot of frustration, certainly from even the closest of allies to this president.
Rick, one of the impacts of the president's comments this week in Charlottesville is that everyone up and down the government is being made to answer for it. So you have the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. He has to come out at an event where he'd like to focus on other things and talk about the Ku Klux Klan and talk about Nazis and talk about what happened in the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia. What does that do to a State Department to have all the attention and all the oxygen on something like that and not where he wants it? And by the way, not to have the staff to get the things done that he wants to get done.
By the way, the biggest gimme in politics is criticizing Nazis. I think
You would think at least since 1945.
Yeah, right. That's a no-brainer. You can always do that successfully, and President Trump could not. In fact, it really, as you say, it's a huge distraction for everybody in government that you have to, instead of going about your daily business, you have to support something that the president said, and it just speaks to how transgressive his presidency is, that it undermines just the regular operations of government. Not only are they're not doing the blocking and tackling in the White House, that is getting in the way of the agencies doing that, and that's a real problem.
And Casey, we keep hearing that, oh, no, we're going to go back to health care reform. We're going to pass
infrastructure.
We're going to get, this was infrastructure.
Interesting point, Evan.
You know, what a telling story yesterday that the president disbanded his infrastructure council because people were already starting to quit that. How remarkable. We can't even have presidential councils because people will quit. What impact is this going to have on the Hill for passing health care reform, for passing tax reform, for passing whatever type of reform he wants to pass, when you now have 5, 6, 7 Republican senators that the president has decided unilaterally to go to war with?
Yeah, I think obviously it is going to make their agenda that much harder. I think on tax reform in particular, a lot of people like Gary Cohn, who has been very privately upset by the president's remarks. He is a critical player, and so if you start to lose people like that from the administration, or lose, they're on their heart anymore.
Have you heard anything? There was a rumor on Wall Street yesterday that he was leaving, and but then the White House pushed back hard. Have you guys heard anything on whether he's even considering leaving?
I have not heard from the White House. There was, as you say, pushback. There's been some conversations on the Hill around what might, if he does decide to go, what might happen with tax reform. But look, I think broadly on the agenda itself, I mean, even before you get to trying to rewrite the tax code, we're heading for some major crises here. The president's going to have to decide whether or not he wants to shut down the government over funding his border wall. They're going to have to raise the debt ceiling. That's, I think, a big part of what Mitch McConnell is thinking as he tries to respond to this in a forceful but careful way, because he doesn't want to have to be in a position where, Republicans are essentially, our government stops functioning entirely because they can't do their jobs.
I just wonder, Joe, if there's a note to members of the cabinet right now in the president's inner circle, Gary Cohn, others, when you have the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee talking about the president's stability,
right?
Is it okay just to be privately upset? At this point, I think that's irresponsible. I mean, you can be privately upset as much as you want, but you're here for this country.
I mean,
the president's unstable.
You're asking me personally. I think
I couldn't do it. Yes.
I think if we're talking about concerns about stability, then being inside, trying to bring stability to an erratic situation, maybe that's justifiable. But if you're talking about a man who uses his position to bring aid and comfort to white supremacists, to cheer David Duke, to have David Duke cheer him back, to have neo-Nazis and Klansmen praising him, then Willie, at that point, if you are Gary Cohn, at that point you are no longer serving the United States of America. You are serving a man who is against everything this country stands for when he embraces white supremacy. And I don't know how you justify staying, especially if, like Gary Cohn, you've done so many noble things in the past, contributing to Jewish centers and other charities.
Well, I think the two arguments you just made are the ones that are going through the minds of people like Gary Cohn. He wants to be a pillar of stability. He wants to get tax reform done. He's a guy that Wall Street trusts. He's one of them. They think he's an adult in that room, and that's why you saw when there were rumors he was leaving, the market went down and the White House had to come out and push back against that. But as you say, he and his family are leaders in the Jewish community. He's from Ohio. They've done a lot of good work there and in New York as well.
Well, that explains
so
why he's leaving the Trump administration.
Is it more important for him to be there to stabilize the economy, to push through an agenda, or does his core
does that mean
pull
that
him
he's going to
away
make
from
a
the White House
vodka
because he doesn't want to be at the side
Jared
of the man
Kushner?
whose
He's Jewish,
beliefs
right?
and the things he's said over the last week run so counter to everything he stands for?
Yeah, that provides comfort, again, to white supremacists, Klansmen, and neo-Nazis. Of course, people are talking about him possibly getting a Fed chair. I don't know if to be put in the Fed by a man, by a president who is a hero now to white supremacists, Klansmen, and neo-Nazis.
It's not enough to be privately upset anymore. Still ahead on the Morning Joe, Chuck Schumer.
If you aren't outraged, you aren't paying attention.
On the Confederate statue.
Well, you know what? It's actually a smart move for Chuck Schumer to say, don't make this about the statues. Make this about the white supremacists.
Yeah. But will Nancy Pelosi listen?
One would hope.
Alright. Murphy's is here, and I just got done feeding the anemones.
Just briefly, it's not my lunch hour. I had an errand to run. I was passing the house.
Nom 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 anemones. Okay.
Hey, Sean.
Alright, so. The president is narrowcasting. That was up there earlier. That sounds like it might be interesting. This is all getting pretty interesting, isn't it? This is like the time you want to be watching news so that you can absorb the moment history happened.
Yeah, read from Peggy Noonan, who writes in the Wall Street Journal about Trump's tangle of rhetorical inadequacy. Here is a cliche, but only because it is true. In times of stress and fracture, people want a president who is calm in the storm, who speaks to the nation's moral conscience, recalls first principles, evokes what unites us. Mr. Trump did not do any of that. If a leader is particularly gifted, he could, in a moment of historical stress, succeed in speaking to the nation's soul and moving its heart by addressing its brain. This kind of thing comes from love of the country, our people, what we've been. It struck me this week, as he spoke, that his speeches and statements are particularly loveless. The public, Mr. Trump, is not without sentiment and occasional sentimentality, but the deeper wells of a broader love seem not there to draw from. 7 months in, people know they can look to him for a reaction, but not for comfort, inspiration, or higher meaning. And James Peterson, I just wonder, I've seen people who go on television and analyze for a living crying after hearing this president speak, weeping openly, distressed, disturbed, afraid, embarrassed that their president is so inadequate.
I mean, when you think about this week, it's been a long week, and I'm particularly moved by what's going on in Barcelona because I was there with my family just a few weeks ago.
Wow.
We were on Las Ramblas. I was there with my wife, my daughter, my son. It's an incredible space too. Like, there's so many people there from all over the world, and the idea that he would respond to that with some mythological thing about a general using pig's blood. I mean, the Islamophobic piece of it is one thing, but the absence of any kind of presidential sense of the world. And when you juxtapose that terrorist activity with what happened in Charlottesville and the president's response to that, remember, people feel vulnerable in the immediate aftermath of these kinds of incidences. They look to leadership to sort of edify them in that moment. And this president has been completely incapable of doing that.
You know, Donnie, the great Peggy Noonan wrote about his ignorance of who we have been, of what we have been. I want to add to that, because that's actually an incomplete list. He has a complete ignorance of who we are. This is the most short-sighted political move the man could make. This is narrow casting in a country that has over 300 million people. This is narrow casting for early GOP primaries. And this is what gets you at 34% in the approval polls. We've seen the narrow casting. We've seen the targets. We've seen the hatred. It's shown itself in Charlottesville. But look at the response to Charlottesville. Look at all the people that went out, filled the streets, lined the streets. Like this morning in Barcelona, people filling the streets, applauding, coming out, showing the strength. We saw the strength of a mother whose own daughter was slain by white supremacist hatred. Get up and say, you know what? I've lost my daughter, but if it brings more attention to this cause, so be it. We've seen this sort of hatred in Charleston. What did that bring up? That brought out for me, I think the most, I don't know that I've ever been as moved outside of a church service as I was by the people of Charleston who showed true love, showed true power, showed true compassion.
Forgiveness.
Showed forgiveness. I forgive you. Donald Trump is so disconnected from that country. He will never win another election. He's narrowcasting, and that's the political insanity of this as well.
Joe, you talk about humanity. I'd love to set words into who we are. And we as a country are decent people, and we are all created equal. Now, Donald Trump is not a decent man. It's just very, no matter how you slice it. And
Hey, Maximo. Bye, everybody. I gotta go back to work now.
And he used the word stability. He could have put mental stability in front. We know that's what he meant. You see the Republicans, you see the right-wing media, or the conservative media, with James Murdoch, with what he did. You see the business community.
And by the way, not just James Murdoch, which obviously very powerful, but also you see day in and day out on Twitter feed some of the most conservative voices on the right coming out every day going, no, this is not conservatism.
Yes.
This is Trumpism.
So the fundamental pillars, conservatives, business, Republicans starting to peel. And it's time for people to choose sides. It's time, Miki, you touched on this in the earlier hour. Gary Cohn is a very, very decent man. We have a lot of the same friends who privately, is upset. No. Once you stand next to this man now, you're standing next to a man that in some way or shape or form has endorsed the Klan and Nazi, period. That's on his lapel pin now. It doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. And I understand the generals who are not going to leave because they have a rationale. You know what? We got to keep this guy. But if you're Steve Mnuchin, who's you, and if you're Gary Cohn, or you're Dina Powell, these are all good people.
How about Elaine Chao? They were standing
You are
next
literally
to
and figuratively, and this is the time the peel has to continue. This is a man who is ill. We're seeing it. That's now. It's almost pathetic the way he's behaving now. He is ill.
Almost.
The peel has to continue.
But there's been no peel in the White House. Remember, Nicole Wallace came on this show on Wednesday morning and said, if you don't resign en masse this morning, you'll be forever tainted by what the president did yesterday. Nobody's walked out yet. Sam Stein, I want to underscore Joe's point. This is a quote from Bob Corker, playing on President Trump's famous slogan. He said, Bob Corker, this is Republican from Tennessee, Bob Corker, quote, the president has not demonstrated that he understands what has made this nation great and what it is today. Effectively saying President Trump does not understand the country over which he presides.
Deja vu.
I mean, it's been a tough week for everyone, I guess.
Deja vu. The experience or sensation that something has happened before.
But I don't.
Deja vu. The experience or sensation that something has happened before.
I don't necessarily.
Deja vu. The experience or sensation that something has happened before.
I don't really know if I agree with you guys. I think what's made this week remarkable is that Trump has articulated what has been
Psych.
previously in a sort of ugly underbelly of our nation. We are and have had a fairly nasty past when it comes to race relations. And what he's done is he's essentially taken what had been a dog whistle and he shouted it out. And this is why it's so appalling to us, is that...
Did he just say he sharted it out?
For the first time, and that I can remember, and certainly maybe Joe can speak to this more, but for the first time you have a president who is actually articulating these things that have been the subtext for a while. This is a Southern strategy on steroids. And it's not just about race in this case, it's about religion too. Watching the video of those Nazis walking through the streets of Charlottesville, chanting Jews will not replace us, was really, really difficult. And for a president who has a son-in-law and a daughter who are Orthodox Jews.
Supposedly.
I don't know how he can actually stand there and say there are some good people.
Where are they?
That's his family. That's his family vacation.
Andrea Mitchell, I know you covered foreign policy and politics for decades, and I just have to ask you, what that press conference, Steve Mnuchin.
Does Kuchner look anything like Jon Stewart to you? He looks like Caesar Octavian to me.
Elaine Chao, Gary Cohn, they're standing with the president, standing by his side as all of this came out of his mouth. And I just, at this point, what's the decision? Is the decision to step up, do something hard to influence this presidency, or become complicit? Or is that too stark a choice?
That's an interesting group of people right there. Mika's dad and Andrea Mitchell. Sorry to find such a hilarious pause moment. They both escaped fascism in different forms. A lot of parallels in their story. A lot of parallels in the wisdom gained by both of those women. Now, what you're looking at here, to different degrees, one could make the argument, is three former Horde propagandists. That is, I mean, three. I can count. Yeah, I can count. Spat out the wrong number from my face for no fucking reason. Three former communists to a certain extent. Okay, well, namely the two women who saw, well, really, you can count Mika as the daughter of a former communist spy, who really didn't see that the Cold War had never ended, that she was actually a furtheration of the, quote, leftist side of it. Andrea Mitchell, well, they say you grow more conservative with age. She saw her own way into repentance. But Joe knows something. Joe's been approached. Joe's been paid. I think Joe's even been on RT promoting his show, hasn't he? And Joe knew. I think he's confessed it to Mika. And I think together their love has been formed around their mutual acknowledgement of the truth that I've been trying to get everybody to discuss. They are, I believe, engaged, or if not married now. Joe and me. Morning marriage. Now, the thing is, the difference between somebody like Mika and Andrea is that you are looking at two distinctly different tribes of authentic Hebrew. Okay? And while her maiden name was Brzezinski, and that is a Slavic-esque sounding name. If you go back, it's probably one that was changed due to fear of ethnic cleansing. And people like Rupert Murdoch, they might have some of that blood, but they don't have any of that love. See, it was out of love that the leftists were brainwashed into self-destructive causes. And it is because of that that it is written. Who? The heathen. Who? The Gentiles. They're the ones that are going to come to the light in the end. And when it all comes down to it, it's only right that they should. Because every one of us, including myself, knows that if we would have went to church more and not let them people turn us away and stayed there and argued with them, if all of us would have done it, it would have made a difference. But that was not our fate. That's why we felt as though we were all isolated. That's why we assumed there was nobody else thinking the same thing. This is hypocrisy. This is not what the Bible says. But it is that light that guided so many into even becoming atheists. That is slowly guiding them all to truth now. Despite the efforts of the so-called progressive left as presented here on the very popular YouTube channels. Sorry, allergies. And you know, speaking of them, let's get into the dossier, shall we? Before we continue this, let me switch cams. Okay. So, let's see, a little too far down there. Okay, there we go. That's fine. I tried to like lay the blanket out to make my background look a little more uniform, and that, you know, I shouldn't have fucking bothered. It's not distracting. It's not distracting. It's not distracting. Okay. What is with the little vagina shape? Like, what? Smack that. Never mind. Anyways. Yeah. I mean, what better segue into the dossier, really? That dossier. The one with the hookers and blow. No, hookers and piss. I mean, I thought it was supposed to be like, you know, the American way was hookers and blow. I thought, you know, but like apparently the Russian way is hookers and piss. I don't. That's like. That's why porn isn't even worth surfing for, you know, like weird Russian piss stuff. Some of you were laughing a little too hard at that one. Take it easy, Maximo. Thanks for hanging out, bro. So, The Trump-Russia dossier. As if it took that for us to know about Trump and Russia. It's not like Jesus came back and fucking told you. Wait a minute. Jesus. You know, there's been a lot of parallels with reality. Before I get into that Trump-Russia thing too much. Like, Heather Heyer. Same occupation as my wife. Same age as my wife. Fucking creepy, isn't it? But there's been a series of events, like, you know, Merlin's tree showing up on the show that I created with a snap of my fingers to begin with, after yet another snap of my fingers. Documented, spaced out, kind of. And then, you know, in light of all this, what's going on past few days now, there was the Charlie Hebdo thing. And that came right after I taught what lesson? That the word Jesus is derived from Gaelic. Something to do with why they rejected Christ, because they said he was just a Galilean. How could he possibly know anything? And I told you that it is simply what the Jews would call God. I am the self-creating God, the only one that created himself first. The other ones were created by other things. They had a concept of a God derived largely from logic, one would say. Or is it possible that logic is derived from God? Something that most never consider. It's why they gave up on the churches, for instance. So, Je, the prefix, means I. Sus, the root word of sustain, means being, means existence. And in French, they simply add an I. Je suis. The S is silent. Je suis. Charlie became a big thing. Teaching you that what I was telling you was true. And you could go and ask a Catholic, or you could go and ask an evangelical, or you could go and ask this person and that person who has been misled over and over again throughout the centuries and the generations. And they wouldn't be able to confirm it for you. But the world, the universe, was teaching you that what I was telling you was true. And you can go back and look at my video, and you can go see that that happened first, and then that happened. And one can at least logically conclude that if I'm not who I think that I am, that at least the universe agrees that I should be deluded as such, because I would not be capable of being so deluded if it not for the vast plethora of evidence that the universe has provided. including my memories from birth. Birth. Wondering why the black bar is so big. Right, hold on. This is... Oh, look at that. It's like a thing that's supposed to be there, and now it is. How about that? So, the dossier. Since I'm just getting on a fucking rant, being all offended about my lack of an opportunity to even fucking help, basically. Because as I said earlier, it is pretty obvious that I'm defending these people. I have been, over and over again. Defending Western civilization, defending the government, defending the Catholics, defending the Freemasons, defending the real Jews. Whereas these people basically say that all Jews are false, all Catholics are pedophiles. I mean, they really have like some nasty, hateful conspiracies and accuse just organizations of decent people of doing really heinous things. And that's been something that far left, quote, not like them, like Democracy Now! And further to the left than that. And like the Young Turks, and far right, like neo-fascists and even Islamofascists, have all had in common. They've all had this one attack line in common. And who they've had it in common with has been Vissarion, David Koresh, that weird guy that was on TV and said he was Jesus in the 70s. The Venezuelan Antichrist says the same thing, and he's got like 666 in gold on his podium, and that's just special. But there's been a pattern of every single Antichrist not only having this same rhetoric, but if you really do some digging, you can find that they've all basically been funded through the same organizations. And in fact, most of them have to do with the same organization directly that Alex Jones has to do with, i.e. the Seventh-day Adventist Church, for whom which, if I understand things appropriately, Vissarion is their Jesus come back. Okay? So if you think Vissarion's a minor fucking thing, go look up how many Seventh-day Adventists there are in Russia, because I'm pretty sure he's their guy. Mr. I read the Vedas and realized I was Jesus, who happens to have used to work for the Russian military and then kind of just failed in life. Anyways. What's this dossier about? Did we need the dossier? Did you, the people on here, listening to the truth that I've been, like, you know, risking my life and whatnot to bring to you, definitely risking my financial livelihood at the very least. Did you need that? Did you need the dossier to know that Trump and Russia were colluding? Was it leverage? Really? What was it? Okay. So, the standard educated CIA person would know, should know, that the Russians would collect this type of information on someone that they would install as a satellite puppet, either in a government or as the head of a mafia organization or cartel or rebellion, etc. they would then use this leverage to make sure that they were always paying them enough. Fair? Right. And while on the surface, that makes sense, I don't think it's the case. Now, I'm not saying that it did not provide a bunch of useful information. But sometimes the best way to control the spread of truth is to control the manner in which it is divulged. So, if I tell you 3 things that are true, and I tell you one thing that really sounds like an obvious lie, what reason do you have to believe those 3 things that are true? Savvy? So you can have all the connections and bank accounts in the world, but if somebody who got paid a little bit of money to do one thing got paid a lot more money to make that thing seem a little bit implausible, to be a little bit incompetent when they did it, to compile a dossier in a seemingly incredible fashion. What do you think the outcome is more plausible? That they're going to work for the person that paid them $40,000? Or the one that's invested millions and given them more than $1 million? So you have this Fusion GPS company that allegedly the Democrats paid $40,000. Okay, sure. Take that as a given. Russians regularly pay millions and invest and own most of this company. So, like, you know, it's kind of like, who does Trump work for? Does he work for the salary that he's donating? Or does he work for all the fucking money he's making on emoluments? You know? It's not something that should have to be pointed out to you, but there is the demonic factor here. There is the spiritual side of this conflict. These are all wars. These are all battles that are going on in our hearts and minds right now. The bullets don't need to fly for the war to have started. Tiger Lily sure don't think so. I don't know if y'all heard that stampede of kitten furriness. Tiger Lily, Tiger. What you doing? Anyways. So, Vladimir Putin, KGB people in general, are taught how things are going to play out the way we're taught how to solve, like, math problems. Okay? So they know, okay, we're going to let this guy compile this dossier, you know, by not shooting him. And we're just going to make sure he includes this bit of information by either telling him to, which they very easily could have done, or simply fucking feeding it to him and making him think that it's real. I'm talking about the guy that apparently Fusion, or had worked for Fusion GPS, but the Democrats had hired individually, I don't know. Like not many Democrats want to bother talking about it, and not many Republicans are being honest about it. So I'd have to refresh my memory on it before talking too much more about the specifics of what the Democrats did. But I believe the whole idea goes back before it was understood of how much Russia was involved in the company, and it possibly could have been presented by people posing to be sympathetic with Ukraine who actually weren't. But then it goes back. Then we go back to the whole accusation of it being wrong in some way for Hillary Clinton to have gotten information on Trump and Russia colluding, when it was Russia who was invading Europe, you know, and killing Americans. And killing Americans. Russia's been killing Americans by proxy for a long time now. And I don't just mean Cold War shit. I mean, since we've been in Iraq. Now, to understand exactly why Putin wouldn't feel the need to have leverage on Trump, because there's no need for it. Understand that? There's no need whatsoever. This is not a new relationship. This is not two men with disparaging points of view. This is one order. This is the same mafia, the same mentality. Okay. Putin simply put that out there, the same reason why he allowed the dossier to be created to begin with. Because he knows how things are going to play out. He knows this is something that's meant to be found. Okay, so this is how we want the argument to play out about it. Okay. This is how we will divide them. That's the objective. It's not leverage. It's not plausible deniability. It's not even so much as just being a distraction. It's about what the manner of that distraction is. What about the form that distraction takes? Is one side arguing it doesn't matter that there's fucking piss hookers. One side arguing none of the rest of it can be true because there's piss hookers. And one side still arguing, you know, there could actually be piss hookers. I mean, it's Russia. Fuck's sake. Anyways. So, anybody got any more questions or comments related to the dossier? I mean, I personally resent, because of all the effort I put into how much stock people are putting into the dossier, as if it were, you know, the thing. But you can thank, you know, Washington Post and CNN and other possibly non-repentant people like those girls. So anyways, Man, I wish I wouldn't have. I wish it wouldn't have took that. But you know, to get people really talking about Trump and Russia. But you know, I was thankful for it. I'll take what I can get, even though I understood even at the time the intent of it was mostly to distract from all the credible reporting that's been done already. And say, oh, these people just believe this type of stuff. Okay. But also, it seems to have listed some very crucial things in order to discredit them, as far as the bank trail goes. But anyways. Y'all gotta realize, if you want to have hindsight that is in fact 2020, you need to stop being arrogant and assume that people might actually be a whole lot smarter than we are. And that's it. So let's finish up this Andrea Mitchell and Joe and Mika.
I guess everyone has to make their own moral choice. You could not do it. I know I could not do it.
There's no way.
But they have to make a choice based on what they believe is the greater good. I understand, frankly, why John Kelly
Indeed.
is there. I really do. And I understand for sure why Mattis and the Joint Chiefs. Look at the way the Joint Chiefs all spoke out. And the chairman of the Joint Chief in Beijing, Joe Donford, on his way back from a really tough trip in Asia and heading into the joint military exercises that are supposed to start this weekend and Monday. And the threat from Kim Jong-un that, okay, I'll take a pause and I won't fire that missile toward Guam and precipitate what could be a nuclear confrontation if there's a retaliation and an escalation, depending on whether you step down and don't do that exercise. And they're making these decisions now. What kind of exercise? Are we going to pull back, or are we going to be consistent? These are the decisions these people are making. And you have this incredible moment where the president does not only not come out on camera after Barcelona, but ends up with that false internet rumor, that lie about General Pershing. I mean, how do you get your arms around your head around that? I don't know what I would do in that situation, but I know there's a mix of ambition and patriotism and duty and fear that may be on the domestic side among White House staff.
Do you know what a provocateur is? Well, you just let one take over the fucking White House. He wants us destroyed. Get it? Everything he does is to destroy us. Not to make himself rich. Nothing of the sort. That's just a fucking bonus. His primary objective is to divide us so that we can be more easily conquered.
But I give the military a total pass. I think they need to stand.
I understand that. I was talking about the people who were standing right there.
I know you are.
Is Elaine Chao still standing by both men? Why?
When one is embracing white supremacists.
Come on.
And attacking her husband.
And trashing her husband.
There's,
trashing her husband. And she stands there every day while Donald Trump is trashing her husband. Here, he's preaching moral equivalency with white supremacists and neo-Nazis, and just standing there.
So, and Steve Mnuchin and Gary Cohn, look at the picture of yourself standing by this president.
And James, Sam brings up a good point. He's talking about Jews in the administration that are sitting back saying nothing. Let me talk about my people. Let me talk about evangelicals. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church that didn't have the best history in the past, a Southern Baptist church that had to move beyond a lot of that, that's still fighting to move beyond a lot of that. But forget about the Southern Baptist Church specifically. What about evangelicals? What about the evangelical leaders that are supporting this man? What about the evangelicals across the South, across America, that hear him making common cause with white supremacists, getting praise from David Duke. And you have the story in the New Testament of the Good Samaritan, right? You've got Jesus, one of the first things you read, the words from Jesus' mouth in the New Testament, the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the poor in spirit. You can go to the Sermon on the Mount a couple of chapters later. What does Jesus say? He says, you've heard it said, love your friends and hate your enemies. I say love your enemies too. And he says, you know how often you have to forgive?
Pray for those that hate you.
70 times 7, which means you have to keep forgiving forever. And he says, blessed are the merciful, for they shall be shown mercy. I want to know, with the president's evangelical task force, where are those leaders? Why won't they speak out? Because they're speaking for, in my opinion, something much bigger than a political faction. They're speaking for a church, and they're speaking for their faith, and they have been sickeningly quiet.
Or at least they should be. I'm impressed with your biblical knowledge, Joe. But I think Trumpism is a slippery slope. And the folks who wanted to align themselves with Trump and with Trumpism thought they were going to get something out of it. Whether that was tax breaks or whether that was Gorsuch, the Supreme Court nomination piece of this was very, very big for evangelicals.
Right.
And if you talk to some of them, Joe, they will tell you that that's still a win for them. That's still a big enough win for them.
So he can embrace Klansmen. He can embrace white supremacists.
Even in this context, they will still chart that up as a win, something that's very, very important for them politically. Now,
you can't argue that because Mike Pence would make this.
Well, exactly.
That's a false argument.
Mike Pence actually.
I'm only telling what evangelicals say.
But what I'm saying is Mike Pence is even. I mean, Donald Trump's not even conservative.
He's not even conservative. But again, it's a slippery slope. You make this bargain saying this is what we're going to get. And who knows what Trump is going to do.
Guess what? You're not going to get it. Step up, do the right thing. It's not that hard.
I agree wholeheartedly. And
I mean, our democracy is.
They have to look to their religion and look to God in order. So that's right. To make a moral decision. But the morality of this presidency is vacant.
Okay. Joe, what you said about Charleston and what the mother of Heather Heyer has been doing, that's grace. And that's what the country needs right now from the White House, and that's what we are not getting.
That's not correct. I do want to say there are priests and pastors across the country who work both out very strongly in this week, but his closest friend, I think, in the evangelical community is Jerry Falwell Jr.
Evangelicals aren't fucking Christians. They're an organized network of fucking Satanists.
The day after the Trump press conference at Trump Tower, he tweeted, "Finally a leader in the White House, jobs returning, North Korea backing down. Bold, truthful statement about Charlottesville tragedy. So proud of real Donald Trump." That's from Jerry Falwell Jr.
There you go. Sam Stein said, there you go. There are some people that, they don't even get 30 pieces of silver and they'll sell their souls.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And, power is an amazing magnet for a lot of people. It forces them or compels them to overlook moral bankruptcy in certain cases. I guess if you are looking at this past week, there are reasons to be heartened. There's been admonishment of Trump from the military establishment, from top congressional leaders in his own party, from the CEOs of corporate America who were serving on his own councils. And that's an interesting and important development, I would argue. But I fear, and I think a lot of people fear, that we are at this place where we will essentially move on to the next crisis or legislative battle. And when Congress comes back in September, there's a whole host of things that they have to deal with that are all massive policy lifts. We have a government to fund. We have a debt ceiling crisis that's on the horizon. You have the possibility of tax reform and maybe an infrastructure bill. And my guess is, and maybe I'll be wrong, but my guess is that as soon as we move on to another dramatic story, perhaps something international will happen, that will kind of put this in the rearview mirror. I mean, it's very hard for me to actually remember that it was 1 week ago that it felt like we were on the precipice of a nuclear standoff with North Korea. That seems quaint and in the distance almost, but that happened. And I think we have almost too good a metabolism for news these days. And I think we need to stop at certain points and say, you know what, let's not let this story go. Let's continue to gnaw on it and chew on it. And I think this is one of those stories.
Well, this is
Yes, indeed. Okay, so let's just do a quick check for any recent developments. Oh, good. Another attack. This time in Finland. 2 confirmed dead in a stabbing spree. Well, so much for Terry's favorite song. CNN is actually making a little documentary thing called Trump, the first Twitter president. Let's hope he's the only fucking Twitter president. Wait, did I just say that? No. He's not the fucking president. Fuck. Oh, stop pouring your Kool-Aid at me. State Department confirms 1 American dead in the Spain terror attacks. Anybody see the moon last night? I've never seen it look more like a fake projection, that's for sure. It was kind of crazy. Like, I don't even subscribe to that theory, but it really looked like it bad last night. There's like a little sliver, and there's like Saturn just right there. Okay. Oh. Secretary Tillerson has given an actual statement on Barcelona. Well, doesn't look like too much else that's on topic anyways. So I'm going to go ahead and call it a broadcast. And I thank everybody for joining, and hope you learned something. I don't know really what the hell else to end on. Hope you learned something. Yeah. Today's program was brought to you by the letter V. V is my favorite ingredient in coffee. Anyways, so, yeah, that's my ending. I know it sucked, and I'm fine with that. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please click the thumbs up button if you don't think this video sucked too bad. And make sure you're subscribed. check your subscription if you are a subscriber, because they do tend to just fall off for no reason. Please click the notification bell so you can be notified of future broadcasts and videos. And go watch some homestarrunner.com strong bag bands. Bye now.
Takes my pain back to a place I don't understand. I know, Lord, I know it's in my heart and baby down in my soul. You, baby, you can't take it no more. No, I know I'm walking out that door the way it treated me too many times before. Don't you know you love me, baby, too? Oh, you know I want you there, I wanna be right there with you. I know I got